titanic work. But here we are. What are we going to see today? We're going to see the outcomes of special studies that we have scheduled for C4D, but as special studies. Baseline. Number two, value change. Number three, dignify income, which is a super interesting concept that you will be delighted to hear of. And fourth, carbon, because I think the opportunity we have for agroforestry in Colombia is unique. And the special circumstance we are living today, uh, as a result of what's going on in Africa, for instance, is going to help us position ourselves as a country in the world market. I believe that the target we have with the National Cacao Growers Council for 130,000 tons by 2030 is going to place us among the 10 best in the world. And C4D is the first step to achieve that. Yesterday we were talking about that with Madam Minister, and I think we're going to achieve that. I hope with the help and support of you all. So just to go into the special studies, the reason we are here, baseline, dignified income, carbon, and value chain. So without further ado, we start. Layla, please. Juan Carlos Arroyave, specialist in agro-industry and production of tropical fruits and products, specialist in industrial finance, and as project evaluation, broad experience in the cacao producing sector, palm oil, tropical fruits. Among his labor experience, he highlight the role as vice president for raw consumables and agricultural development in Casa Luque during 16 years. Mr. Arroyave, welcome. The floor is yours. So, good morning, all, and thanks a lot for coming for answering our call. First of all, it's a pleasure to share once more with so many friends, with so many non-persons of this wonderful sector. Now, as moved from Mutual Consultants, the company I belong to, truth is that it has been a pleasure to work and carry out these studies that Pablo was talking about. Uh, but this work, specifically this work, has important content for what comes for the sector. I think and I want that as from what we are going to see today, a baseline and complementary change in crops, we have a reflection in the forum and look once more with different eyes our cacao growing sector. The truth is we are feeling proud because this work has been carried out with a lot of mystique, seriousness, and plan. Quite important one that I consider is vital for any development plan that intends to promote agriculture industry in the country. I think programs like this should take their time as the C4D, dedicated to plan, dedicated to see how to diagnose and characterize agriculture group beneficiaries, that is. So over that base, can construct an impact and a strategy for the program. I think that was done here with very accurate. We are very happy and proud to have participated in this. Now, it's also important to talk about the content because when one talks about figures like the ones we're going to speak about in finance, we need to put in the context in place. This work was carried out between April and September 2022, but had some important variables in it that no doubt affect or induce to produce certain outcomes. We were coming from post-pandemics, a year, farmers and technicians uh, had restrictions to visit the farms. They had restrictions to, of course, to be in the front line of, of the farming task. So we had, on top of that, two other important phenomena. La Nina, to start with, that many years never did have, and that meant that crops impacted, especially the behavior of production, the increase of pests and diseases over the crops. But this is not, you know, apart from that, we have had inflationary situations. Now, for fertilizers, saw increases of 85 and more percent, and our hand labor, as a result of inflation, is going up steadily, and we have seen important increases in that, especially in the cost of hand labor and availability of hand labor. And that is a complex issue in the country right now. And I want to highlight that because it was the context in which we move and we, let's say, extracted the information. Now, this Nina climate phenomena, the Nina phenomena, it was a double one. It brought uh, difficulties, strong ones, in respect to having access to farms and extract information. There were cases where it was almost impossible to reach certain regions. And uh, when we hear about the methodology, we will see how that worked out nevertheless. Now, in that context, we saw a situation that I want to highlight here because is let's say discouragement on part of farmers with the situation of the crop and the price situation in general. But funny enough, there were two commodities that in 2021 and 2020 didn't went up. There was palladium and cacao. Palladium, I don't know why, really. It's a metal that is used for certain things, but cacao didn't go up. And others like corn, soybean, coffee, etc. All commodities were subject to inflation, to pandemics, of that problem that we had, like logistics and movement of containers that were stuck somewhere in the world. And the farmer, that meant that he was pretty discouraged and he was sad because there was always a comparison with not only with his own crops or other crops and those of his neighbors, and prices that went up with other products. Coffee. We had record prices in corn, for instance. Corn, soybean were scarce in that went up. Palm oil also saw an important increase in prices. But that was felt in this process, and if a farmer had that kind of discouraged because he had the prices of 7,580. Now the context is different. The market is behaving different. Surely later on we are going to see that we're going to coordinate and think, so to speak, to evolve the cacao crop and products in this scenario we are living today. It's a complex scenario, no, but I believe that there's important information to start see the cacao farm from another point of view. That's the final message we want to leave here for you to reflect about. Now, the baseline study is a study that was working in Solidaridad with Solidaridad. Solidaridad is a huge consulting firm that has an important support, a statistical one, an important support also for works of this type. And I think we were good partners. We made it, let's say, good, institutionally wise, analysis wise, and statistical analysis wise, very strong. The Solidarity team staff. And why this type of project, these type of projects are important? Well, because first it allows us to diagnose with whom we are going to work, and it is a super key aspect. And in that, companies have failed, and promoting programs and cooperation programs have failed. That we do not do detailed diagnosis to get to know the specific needs of each region. And when I'm saying special regions, so these programs they have a big scope, we have C4D comprised four clusters. Notwithstanding there are cacao growers, farm sizes that are similar among them, and the characteristics and production conditions and management of the crop and all social economic conditions are completely different. The blend in the diet, food, and the way of living are different. And that's why it's important to diagnose in detail, and because that is the base to say, for instance, farm and agricultural extensions oriented to special regional needs and according to the climate of each region. Let's remember that in most cases we have two seasons, rainy season, dry season, but there are some regions that have just one dry season, like in the north part of the country. In the north part of the country, the situation is different, and production and let's say the harvest of the crop is completely different. So, these baseline studies are pretty important as long as they provide information to, let's say, deal with gross topics, quite relevant, so like dignify income. We will see that with Jacqueline Londoño, one of our colleagues, who will be explaining that. And this work allowed to carry out a detailed study of the entire business from the name and surname of producer, family, and all social conditions that family live on, and the economic situation of the family. We went even into the families to see and examine consumption, income, expenditure of the family. And when it came to cacao crop, there was a detailed study to find out exactly where were the tests carried out and how to measure that and obtain that information as from a work that we will be telling you shortly. Everything. Now, the objective of this study is to provide a characterization of the current condition or status of the beneficiary, uh, cacao growers and their farms, to get to know inside what's going on the farm, which is really what making the per se producer having good, fair, or bad results. And the other thing is to provide details of characteristics, conditions, social economic variables. Okay, nevertheless, to provide characteristic conditions, socioeconomic variables, cultural variables of producers, development of their farms, everything that has to do with agricultural productivity of cacao, of course, but complementary crops as well. And hey, beware here, we are going to deal with something different to cacao characterization. That is, we are going to look not only cacao crop, but those that are associated to the agroforestry. That is to understand what crops are in the region next to the producer, close to the producers, what are the characteristics, what is the potential they have, and the importance of these crops and the entire cacao farm environment. And finally, to establish a baseline for the program. So as to how monitor the program, how the program is going to impact. And I think that as from the achievements, let's say, of this study, there is an accurate certain baseline to produce targets, move on to reach a final that would provide an impact over the region.
So the work had the following agenda. First, methodology findings, recommendations, and regarding the approach. As I told you short ago, we had an issue with the planning because we had the time, we had the patience to meet and build the form of what we really needed as an information for a baseline with enough elements to be able to have the levels of a dignified income, to know the work, specific works on the region affecting the productivity. This is a very important work because it is performed by a consultant with a solidarity with C4D. So we agreed on a form of about 280 questions. It is not easy to agree, but an approach on how to gather the information. Afterwards, we have the development and testing of the tools. And here I would like to emphasize on the importance of the training to the technicians when we perform these kinds of jobs. Regarding the service in the field, the difficulty is talking to a technician as agriculture or farmer. We train them, the technicians, on how to interact with a farmer to get the needed answer. And this is an example. Our farmers normally they don't have a book of accounts of their incomes, and the complementary objectives is even more difficult. But we need to calculate what they produce in the complementary crops, the